Reichskommissar Siegfried Müller was in a very jovial mood today when he slipped off the dust cakes that formed at his boots after the morning exercise. He stomped his feet to remove the very last grain of sand and entered his office. He just felt a decision during his morning routine. He devised his good friend, General Jacques Massu, for a gregarious hunt. He'd finally have to pay him back for this cheating of his at the card game from their last meeting of a calmer manner. He'd also have many games with him of fiercer nature for sure. He'd also had a few games of the roughest nature alongside him, but this refers to the game of life and death. The good old days, clear in Müller's memory as ever. How could he forget those days with the man he'd dubbed my long-lost brother? Siegfried Müller slumped into his chair from the efforts of the early morning. Now had come to the greatest effort of his. Forming nice words for a neat letter to invite his friend. He could ask Steiner to check his French after all, but Müller just wanted to tell his good friend one concise message with a letter. Reichskommissar just hopped off the helicopter when one of his bureaucrats approached him. Müller just couldn't hold back his laugh while the man's oversized suit rippled in the wind created by his helicopter. He was really struggling to hold all those papers in his hands against the strong rotors. Müller released him from the struggle by laying a firm hand on his shoulder and leading him to a calmer corner. He patted the man's shoulder, leaving a dusty mark on the suit he scornfully glanced at through his fogged glasses. Müller made him hold his two rifles and one substitute, just in case, to exchange them for the paper. He never thought he'd do that, but he glanced a distinctive stamp during their walk. Siegfried Müller clamped all the unimportant notes between his legs and read the letter that concerned him the most. General Jacques Massu's reply was fast, as if shot by a piece of artillery from the French remains all the way to Leopoldville, and just as swiftly did, Müller read the letter. Massu and these elaborate words of his. There it was, the answer he needed, all the validation he wanted. Massu and he would soon join up, just as in the vein of their brotherhood's formation during the Cameroon conflict. It was all coming back so fast, and it was so good. His joy for the day was palpably doubled for all to see. The grin just would never completely vanish for the whole of the day. Fidgeting like a child all the way onto the tarmac, Müller realised he'd arrived much too soon with his helicopter. Massu wasn't due for at least half an hour, so he went inside the airport to get a cleaner military garb for the happy occasion, carefully attaching the iron cross to his breezy camouflage coat. When he was entering the tarmac again, Rolf Steiner was arriving with a grand guard of honour, encompassing his finest veterans and many that served once before under Massu and the French remnant. They were all garbed so formally and pretentious. He had chosen the wrong uniform. He laughed that off. Massu wouldn't mind some informalities or two. The distant noise of an aircraft heading for Leopoldville Airport was coming closer. His anticipation grew with every tone, the aircraft's humming augmented. Then finally, the squeaking onto the tarmac with wheels hitting the runway. The privately owned aircraft took its circle, and Müller's anticipation grew unbearable. The jetway finally docked. The open door, and the general stepped into the hot air. Heat haze above the tarmac, making the onlookers dizzy. Massu was much too pompously garbed in his finest uniform. This bragging idiot. Müller approached with long strides and immediately embraced Massu in a tight brotherly hug. Brother, they greeted each other in unionism, pulling their foreheads together, having their arms swung around the other's shoulder. I walked down to Rolf Steiner, flanked by the guard of the highest honour. Massu and Steiner friendlily greeted each other, though Steiner kept the formal distance a German should keep to what was in reality still an opponent. Müller, however, didn't care the least. The three military men, Siegfried Müller, Jacques Massu and Rolf Steiner, made their way to the relatively ordinary motorcade. Hopping on the back of the truck, Massu and Müller were already laughing in a rowdy manner. The two had much to exchange since their last meeting. As the motorcade wound its way down to Müller's administrative complex, Steiner was struggling to keep track of the conversation. Though fluent in every language the other two used, they chattered like twins separated at birth. Changing from naughty French to pieces of English, from English to German, with a few bits of German to an elaborate conversation in French once again. Even if they didn't comprehend the language either used, they would possibly still understand each other. When Müller, already a bit drunk and Massu still sober, hopped off at the government complex, they entered in for a night of garrulous conversations. Massu updated Müller on the current situation, the French remnants, fitting in an anecdote here and there. Müller, very drunk at this point, elaborating on his many hunts since the last meeting, and on the hunts before their last meeting, of course. He talked about exquisite creatures, gossiped about the other African Reichskommissars, and recalled the heroism of the two's last stand near Cameroon entrenchment, both enjoying fighting more than commanding back then, before the helicopter picked them up. Neither of the two slept for the whole night, drinks and their laughter keeping them awake. Early in the morning their talk lasted, yet they were about to embark on an immersion back to the good old times, the humming of the helicopters heralding in. Their helicopter landed on the only mound that was big enough to properly support the size of this grand helicopter. This great machine would take them to the magnificent hotel complex at Hitlerstadt across the lake, a splendidly idyllic and luxurious resort that would host the Reichskommissariat's friends for the night reverently after their hunting trip. But Müller, of course, ordered a detour to reminisce about the good old times in Massu and possibly bring them back to life a bit longer. Without the slightest trace of fatigue after their long nocturnal talk, the two eagerly hopped on the helicopter. Yet again in a torrent of rowdy laughter, Muller made promises of great game he and Massu would hunt this day. Already reminiscent of their last hunt, when they were in the hot pursuit of a great mountain gorilla, they talked themselves into a frenzy, while their device of transportation was slowly hovering away under great noise and a whirlwind of red-coloured earth, the rotator blades creating a cool breeze. As they were lifted higher into the air, their vigorous talk still didn't abate. Mainly Muller was talking because Massu was carried away by the beauty of Central Africa he so long yearned to see once again. The General was getting a bit drowsy by the constant humming of the machine and the landscape rolling past. Muller meanwhile was vigorous as ever, either energised by the alcohol or by the idea of hunting with his dear friend. As Massu's eyelids shut closed, Muller grinned. He carefully took his friend's hunting rifle out of his lap and began to neatly prepare it, just as he had done with his own. Jack's Massu woke with the start of the noise of gunshots. He nearly stumbled from his seat. Seaver Muller was standing on the landing skids to better peer at his work. As he saw the startled Massu, he got back and heaved his friend to his feet. Muller grinned at his shocked friend and led him to the opening, all the while giving him a brotherly slap on the neck. He jokingly complained about his friend's sleeping habits and showed him what he had missed. Massu finally realised where he was and laughed at himself for losing the bet of the night on who'd be the first to fall asleep. Massu peered out the helicopter, a group of crocodiles skulking near the lake's coast. Two creatures of the rouse group were already dead. Muller took another shot, another hit. Massu turned back to look for his rifle. Muller poked the General's exposed back. He turned and Muller shoved him his rifle. Both had a good laugh at this. The Massu glanced through the opening, took aim and shot. Having hit his desired target, Muller patted on his friend's back. They'd left the crocodiles behind after a brief contest on who would shoot the most of them. Muller won. The damn things were too fast for Massu when in the water. Every few minutes he was teasing him about it, but Massu was used to it. It had been like that forever. It only got funnier when they reminisced about their first meetings during the wars with Cameroon, where a similar challenge was involved, though game of another kind were shot. They couldn't even look at each other without laughing or grinning when Massu spotted something in his canthus, something white, grazing on a plain mound. Muller noticed and followed his friend's gaze. They moved to the skids. Muller nearly shrieked with overexcitement and pulled Massu tight to his body in the same instant. Yet another contest emerged after Muller ordered the pilots to close in. Grinning with overexcitement, he handed Massu his rifle. He explained how he had been deer stalking for white rhinoceros for weeks. Now he had filmed them, and thanked his friend for the beneficial atmosphere he similarly radiated. They were close to the destination, but the contest was priority for now. Having left the rhinoceros and crocodiles behind, it was getting late. The sun's last rays turned the bay in front of Hitlerstad Resort into a beautiful colour. While they hopped off after the helicopter had landed, Massu and Muller greeted by a cool breeze. Then it turned night, with the sun vanishing behind the horizon as resort employees handed out fresh drinks. Gulping the icy cold liquid, Muller was still grinning from his second contest triumph of the day. It was very close. If Massu had only plunged the last bullet into the correct body part of the big brutish white rhinoceros. Muller scuttled away, hastily doffing his clothes to jump into the pool. The Reichskommissar looked at the General expectantly. Massu shook his head, mumbled to himself, and took off his clothes. The heat had been impeccable after all. Muller greeted him with a splash of water. Their comfortable cold bath had them reminisce the time their boat ran out of fuel on the Congo lake. They settled into the biggest suite of the complex for the night. They got everything they hoped for, starting off with the lavish dinner. The two were gradually getting drunker by the minute. With the increasing inebriation, the party turned into an actual, what? The invited guests, both men and women from other rooms, played one game after another, challenged each other to ludicrous contests and a nocturnal swim in the pool. Soon the whole hotel was awake, but Muller's authority prevented any retaliation. In fact, the game only turned rowdier and naughtier from there on. Muller, who had drunk several men unconscious by this point, got into a quarrel with a husband over his wife. Reichskommissar nearly cut the fight short by planting a bullet in the man's head before Massu's intervention. The party swiftly dispersed after this. Massu eventually went back to the suite as well, torn between laughing and shaking his head about his friend. Only Muller was heard shouting unintelligibly and shouting arbitrarily early in the morning. The sun was already high in the sky when Massu and Muller were ready to depart. While Massu, already recuperated from the nocturnal intemperance, enjoyed a nice morning walk and the lavish luxuries the resort offered, Muller had to be carried back to his messy bed in the once appealing suite to sleep the inebriation off. When the helicopter to take them back to Leopoldville arrived, Muller was still somewhat unconscious. This was an opportunity for Massu to take a trip around the island and enjoy the day's relatively merciful sun. Just when the General returned, Muller finally woke up. Though in considerably worse shape than the day before, he seemed very baffled at first, but when they embarked on the helicopter, the things long loaded onto it, the realization gradually emerged. This flight was jovial at first, as Muller seemed a bit drunk, at least behaved like it, but with the gradual passing of time, Muller sunk back into his baffled state. However, Massu didn't worry the least. This night's bender left the Reichskommissar better off than after their first common victory in the Cameroon conflicts. Massu reminisced about these good old days with an increasingly broader grin, while also enjoyed the wild landscape. Muller all the while turned unusually silent. To the sparkling the stars, Sigrid, Muller and Jacques Massu's motorcade arrived at Leopoldville Airport. Muller had finally slept off his inebriation, and they enjoyed one last day driving along the tracks of the Congo Lake. It was one last day of enjoyment, hunting and drinking, no less than 2 nights before. Muller challenged 3 pairs of men from his mercenaries and his garrison to contest against him and Massu. The first group to bring back a slaying crocodile was promised Muller's best liquor. Reichskommissariat's friend won, of course. Afterwards, their time was already long due. Thus, they found themselves here on the tarmac, Massu's aircraft waiting for him. Rolf Steiner said his farewells to Massu, still with a formal distance. Muller accompanied him to the entry. One last tight brotherly hug, one last time staring deeply in each other's eyes, one last remark on a hopefully more imminent reunion this time, one last pull on Massu's neck, one last sad grin at Muller, one last goodbye. Siegfried Muller sullenly turned to clear the aircraft door. Jacques Massu entered the vehicle, something glistening in the corner of his eye, yet both felt the heartening anticipation of their next reunion. The Reichskommissar was coming back from the helicopter flight, cut short by an impeccable gust of rain. Soaked through to the bones, he hopped off his vehicle, splashing in a puddle of muddy water, splattering the impeccable trousers of a bystanding bureaucrat. Muller absently grabbed for the pile of documents the man in the disturbingly big glasses was holding out for him and cut him off with a wave of his grimy hand before his incomprehensible babble began. In the thick Bavarian accent, the bureaucrat talked about things that Muller was loathsomely obliged to know about yet felt completely apathetic about. Nonetheless, strange things that seemingly blinded the vision for their actual life was dictating the course of history. Change the course of history in a monotone manner, completely disregarding the fact that one's life's passed still faster and faster until you realise your fate was sealed long ago by the decisions you made, by the things you said, the thoughts you had, the action you took. Siegfried Muller was speaking right now, evoking a thought, inducing an action. Life was passing, but he wanted to seal his fate himself. A message was being prepared for Jacques Massu, Muller's dearest and most trusted friend in what was of course his life. But what has it still in store? One thing changes and the world is another place. Yes, those were the thoughts that determined life rather than impeccable behaviour. Precious knowledge of figures in service to some state is bound to the same rules as men, just of a longer time span. Muller was certainly worried about his future, and he wanted to speak and think about it with his good friend to take action. He would seal a fate worthy of a man that thought like a Reichskommissar. The message required to Reichskommissar in a swift pace while his foot was resting on the back of his truck, his rifle playing pillar for his head, confusedly eyeing his latest work as seen by the frown above his brows. The bureaucrat stopped puffingly. He nearly collapsed as he presented the message, staggeringly noticeable. Muller, with a widening grin of glee for the unnecessary marathon this boring warrior of words and figures had to conduct, was moving towards his latest prey. Stood to pick up something the messenger read caught his attention. The fate that you sealed. He turned from the carcass to demand the origin of the message. Jacques Massu, yes, he agreed to return. Muller's mood immediately skyrocketed, making him nearly jump and exclaim like the child given this gift that always wished for and never stopped niggling about. Yes, Massu agreed to return, a pleasant sooner reunion than between the last occasion and the lake incident, regardless of the Reichskommissar's worries and grueling thoughts, may finally be laid aside. The clerk came storming into the Reichskommissar's office, nearly breaking it off its hinges. He came to a puffing stop while documents flew around from the table by the heavy blow created. Steiner and his superior were just casually discussing a report regarding American cooperation when this happened. Siegfried Muller, who was really confused, lost all his words in an instance of the unusual insolence. Aye, the clerk began to stutter. He got his breath. An imminent report from Germania, Herr Reichskommissar, he finally managed to say, despite his obvious flurry. Muller was even more confused about that, wrinkling his forehead to herald this inquiry. I didn't expect anything. What do you mean by imminent? Steiner took on a concerned expression when he saw the clerk struggle to put the words. Once again it took a few attempts before it came out, the messenger already bathing in sweat. It is the Fuhrer. He has died. A sigh deeper than the Congo Lake made his relief of finally having delivered the message obvious. Rolf Steiner bent back in his chair and inhaled uneasily. He exhaled thoughtfully while massaging his brow in a solemn demeanour. He waved the clerk away. This is a disaster. We can merely surmise what might happen to the Reich. Now Muller took the word quite undisturbed. I don't understand your extremeness. Now Muller took the word quite undisturbed. I don't understand your extremeness, he shrugged. Everyone dies. I'll die too eventually. just as well as you. It might leave a different legacy, but it might live on if we choose so. Someone will carry on for us. He took a sip of his drink. Yeah, Mr. Mustache Man's legacy is something else. At least they let us believe so. However, even Alexander the Great and Napoleon died. The conquerors he imitated. Steiner nodded somberly. I don't fear for the man, I fear for the Empire. It all resembled the last occasion. An elaborate motorcade, extensive columns of honour guards, and a wary Steiner. It all resembled the last occasion, but for a slightly late Reichskommissar himself. Instead of waiting on the beaming hot tarmac an hour before Massu's arrival, Mueller kept lying in bed worryingly longer than usual. He cradled his head in his arms for elapsing minute after minute, nervously fiddling at his brow with the tips of his fingers, putting much effort in elaborating the worries about his future, and suppressing thoughts seemingly a lifetime away. Massu was already halfway down the aisle, the honour guard composed of apt mercenaries and experienced garrison troops, when Mueller approached his dear friend with long strides. Thoroughly confused by the rush hug from his considerably shaggy friend, unkempt hair, unbuttoned uniform, and after all, the jovial Mueller regained something that he had seemingly lost in the course of a week, his smile. Yet it vanished abnormally quickly for a friend can still disappoint his brother in his arms in the heights, on the plateau on the lake, his brother in thought on the area of warfare and of the conduct of life, his brother in terms of ambition, pursuit of their goals, and most importantly, of their unique, often despised way of handling things. His brother until death, if he means to be, whether theirs or someone else's is still up to debate. We have much to discuss, and I feel some minor urgency tingling in my guts. Thus Mueller abruptly pushed Massu down the aisle. You know, Jax, I've been thinking a lot lately. Stuff's going on everywhere that made me question my decisions. Mueller began with an undertone of melancholy as he poured an expensive brandy, produced and sold solely in the US, and always gifted to him by one of the generous American investors. He sat down next to his friend and looked at him with an obviously forced smile. And I am having a feeling you may be the only one who truly understands me. None of these pencil pushers would comprehend my worries as you could. Massu has never seen his endeared friend so sombre. Not once in their so very long friendship has he been so joyless. He either smiled and laughed or smirked to himself about some naughty thing he was up to. His worries must have been critically imminent. Massu laid his hand on Mueller's shoulder. The absent Reichskommissar flinched before realizing whose reassuring hand it was. What is it, mon ami? We can fix it together. Mueller sighed. The one day coming back from an abortive meeting, I looked at this young Bavarian bureaucrat in my service, and well, I always laughed at them for their obscenely accurate behaviour. But the day I pitied him, not only him, all my civil servants, their lives passing as they gear towards the success of a rusting system, of a rusting world of monotone decision-making. His voice started to crack in desperation. Then I realised that even I am a part of the system, that my life is passing from me while I make meaningless decisions in this dreary monstrosity of governance I thought I would find joy in. If not joy in representing my country, joy in the wildlife or whatever. Jax, I am lost. I want to make meaningful decision. I thought that in the case this sorry Reichskommissariat refuses to let me enjoy my life, I could hop over to your lodge in the French remains, we'd be together, and could enjoy our lives. Finally, I'd be rid of this burden. We could be warriors again, of fortune and glory. Mueller looked at his brotherly friend in hopeful anticipation. He knew he was asking much. Mueller still looking at the floor, ashamed of how his lamentation must have looked to Massu. He felt he was on the verge of overstraining their friendship, yet he couldn't live like that. Though Massu was his brother, he had to worry about his own life still. But was there really a reason, or just another meaningless decision he had rendered? Massu was shaken by how devastated his friend was. His voice, his articulation, there might have been tears in the corners of his eyes. He was asking much, but he was his friend, no his brother, and in a serious state besides. While others wouldn't understand Mueller's thinking to abandon the powerful position of Reichskommissar, Massu knew how very endeared of an adventurous life was to Sigurd Mueller. Even the general himself would often find himself abandoning his country for his personal gain. One can't leave his brother like that, for he wouldn't be his brother otherwise. From now on, I'll have the parcel next to mine reserved for you. In case you decide to retire, we can enjoy life together. There it was again, unusually wide and with a spark of surprise. Mueller smiled. While I can't disregard the obligations I have also have the time for my brother. Then we are not lone warriors anymore, but fight side by side for whatever cause until our song has been sung. They sealed their pact with jovial celebrations, the ringing of their glasses filled with brandy. Mueller now, in something similar to his old mood, would take some time to consider his position in Central Africa. At the dawn of conclusion, he for now on have the option to retire in free French territory, and make his life meaningful. He and his brother could finally enjoy themselves from then on without the toils of state rivalry or Mueller's harnessing obligations. Nothing could break this pact now, for it was sealed in brotherly concord. Is that where Muller disappears to? If the shield is victorious, he just disappears. Siegfried Muller was walking up and down along the handrail of his vast balcony, occasionally stopping to bend over it and nervously tap his feet. He already told Steiner to hurry. Just a few minutes ago it was only a mild nervosity when he sat Muller to inquire at the high command at Germania into the sudden fading of the occasional orders. But now he was certainly becoming worried that he had time to ponder about the true consequences of Moustache Man's death. He heard a dull noise through the curtains to the balcony and immediately made his way inside. There you are. What took you so long? Steiner's deep frown surely wasn't the harbinger of good news. The high command at Germania is all a frenzy. They aren't even sure themselves what's going down in the capital, but most of the high command has collapsed. Just as Reich itself. Mass desertions, troop movements, vast protest rallies, the exchanging of shots between fellow brethren. They are speaking of a civil war. Muller put his hands at the back of his head, raised his brows, and sombrely stared at the ceiling. It was a long-drawn minute of silence. Both men's thought processes were palpably heating the already hot air. What are we supposed to do now? If stuff goes down in the Fatherland, it will soon be in the whole of the Reich. It's bad enough we've lost the high command, but even worse, it's what's going to happen here. The partisans, the investors, the shipments, and Huttig. That's only the tip of the iceberg. I don't even dare imagine the many things that could set us ablaze now. Steiner pressed his lips tight. So it begins. Oh, we are officially in the Afrika-Schild now. The sudden lack of supplies from the mainland Reich has revealed our Achilles heel. With our lack of proper infrastructure, military facilities, we're simply incapable of producing enough weapons and ammunition to keep our armed forces well supplied in times of peace, let alone during an actual war. If we want to resist in the event of a conflict, we desperately need to increase our production rates and improve our logistical infrastructure to minimise losses. Maybe we should stop having hunts and parades and actually start organising. Oh well, it's about to kick off. Yeah, I'm trying to sort out our power situation because it's not great right now. Rolf Steiner was slamming a door shut when he entered the Reichskommissariat office with a mess of folders pinched below his armpit. While slamming it shut from the standpoint of his usual behaviour, he glanced at his jovial superior with a stern look, whose response was a face of glee and a mocking salute. "Look at this pile of incomprehensible rubbish, Reichskommissar," the minister was saying grimly while letting the documents fall into the table, triggering an awkwardly noisy bump from the wooden table. "Don't look at this if you want to keep something of your military intellect. This right there is the incarnation of its absence. I can tell you that whoever was involved in this being possible has to be given a new assignment." Muller started looking at the covering sheets of many folders and papers. Meanwhile, the minister added a comment he mumbled to himself through gritted teeth, "Even though I'd prefer harsher punishment." Siegfried Muller straightened himself and looked at his colleague. He tilted his head and made an urging gesture with his hand. "You said so yourself. You don't expect me to read it. Clear me up. I was already beginning to wonder what took you so long." He added a sly smile to his last remark. Steiner took a deep breath and bit his lip. "Our chain of command, Reichskommissar, is the most incomprehensible and dumbest mess I have ever seen, and I have been a part of the Cameroon conflict. Anyway, there are flocks of isolated commando groups that seem to have never communicated with each other since their existence. Furthermore, the command structure within the SS seems somewhat fine. However, don't let me begin with the clutter that the chain of command is when both SS and structuralist garrisons, led by generals that might not have seen a fight since the Second World War, are operating. Now add mercenaries, the clique of certain general, and the different branches of Central African military to the equation." The Reichskommissar's smile had vanished. "Well, rubbish. This is quite untimely, to be discovered only now." He shook his head to underline this. "We have to fix this immediately. East African divisions have begun to advance on the South African border while fighters and bombers take off from remote runways. The contingency plans that colonial officers have been drafting for years will finally be put into effect. While news of the invasion has yet to reach the general public, our press office is currently preparing a statement to be read by the Reichskommissar on all radio stations. In the meantime, the mobilisation of anti-aircraft units and reserve garrisons around our major cities will surely attract attention. We must strike the South Africans quickly and with overwhelming strength. The Afrika-Schild is going to war and victory will be ours." Right, I think we'll just wait a little bit longer before joining in because obviously I think the African Congress is going to... Yep, there they go. Obviously we'll be a little bit more aggressive today. I do want to get through as much of the content as possible whilst we're fighting, but we do want to win. Okay, there goes the African Congress. Siegfried Muller just finished the review of another part of the Central African military force, ready to be sent to the front lines. He signed when he was done and wished the officers cadre much luck as his aides eagerly took the last of their notes. Then he went to the assembled high command and called his aides in the endeavour to his side. I actually shouldn't have to do this with every single one of our units. They are simply too many, and the front lines are very demanding. However, it seems there is no other way. He looked at one of the aides and grabbed for the documents he was holding gingerly. Muller opened the folder of the review and ran through the lines with his finger. That is already the third consecutive company that is lacking in more than a dozen occasions, equipment-wise, and hasn't conducted proper officer training in more than a year. General Bormann shamefully looked at his feet. Mulamba took on a concerned look, and Steiner protectively crossed his arms in front of his chest. Only Wilhelm von Thoma dared to speak. A shameful display indeed. I've always been begging the General Bureau for a proper review of our forces by an apt representative of yours. Muller cut him off angrily. I didn't ask for your opinion. He took a turn on his heels as the next unit assembled in front of him, neatly prepared by his commanding officers. We have so many of them. He took a glance behind. I'm not complaining because of the chore and pain it is to review them, but because I don't want so many to wastefully die. Oh yes, go in there, American. Yes. I don't know why that American helicopter has done that. Uh-oh. That is what I was wanting. What I would really like to do is actually push right across here and get a nice portion of the South African army kind of dealt with. Like, I don't want to go too quick through this war, because I want to get through as many of the focuses as I can before we're forced to flee the nation. Or Muller's forced to flee the nation, that is. As you see, it's built to specifications, General Field Marshal Rolf Steiner said, pointing to the thin dotted line of bunkers and outposts that snaked across the plains of Katanga. The positions are ready to be staffed at any time, if such an emergency becomes necessary. He looked left and saw that Reichskommissar Muller was pleased. Apparently this view of a defensive line from the helicopter was a good one for him. But Steiner was looking at this from another angle. I don't know if it's enough, to be honest, he said, betting Muller would be in good enough mood to not go after him for that statement. They are pretty sparse and spread out, Muller laughed. Oh, it's plenty. The landscape isn't that great to traverse anyway, and we'll have a bunch of outside circumstances that will work in our favour. Outside circumstances? What do you think strategically, dumbass? Laughed Muller. We have all of Barot's land between the South Africans and us, and the terrain is poor there as well. By the time they run into us, these fortifications will convince them to go away and attack the other two. They have larger fronts anyway. Proverbially they attack Hutig. Shenik doesn't need the trouble. But should we expand it, sir? Asked Steiner. We still have the territory out near Leopoldville that needs to be defended. If they get near Leopoldville, Sudwest Africa's done and the war's as good as lost. Muller picked up a rifle. Now enough inspection, let's shoot a cheetah. Reichskommissar Siegfried Muller nervously fiddled with a pen, laid back in the chair with his feet on his desk as he was waiting for the map to be unrolled. He glanced at his accomplices in the matter of planning the war. Willem Ritter von Thoma to his left, proudly displaying his spotless olive green uniform with all those redundant medals. Rolf Steiner, directly to his opposite, thoughtfully scratching his chin. Certainly, Muller began, flipping the pen between his hands. We all agree that the only way to win this war is concentrate our infantry at the front lines. Here. He tapped the pen on the map. And here. Another tap. I abnegate. Reichskommissar von Thoma stood up, adjusting his stainless uniform. While these positions may be wisely chosen, I, out of all those present, can produce the most logical approach. He peered over his two witnesses. Mind me saying this, but the Panzer troop will be key to our victory. We don't actually have any tanks. You're obviously forgetting about Northern Africa so light-heartedly, just because it wasn't your glory. He smirked to himself. The only means we should feasibly apply is the Panzer, reliable and unrelenting. Well, shame we're not using them. Steiner coughed, cutting von Thoma off. Yes, we have heard your ramblings all over again. We know they are swift and efficient. They were key to our victory and crewed by able men. They are deadly war machines. Well, but have you seen our arsenal? It's still the same generation you used in North Africa. I propose we use helicopters instead. He went to the balcony, opened the curtains to reveal the great helicopter in the yard. They are everything a Panzer is, but better. Yeah, we're not using helicopters either. Muller took a miniature helicopter, sweeping it across the map of Africa. They are undeniably good for hunting, but those things weren't built for wars. Men are built for wars. They are reliable and efficient. Just give the right man a rifle, and the wonder unfolds. He took a miniature of a soldier and deployed it at the South African border. This was just the beginning of a verbal battle, dragging on late into the night. The uncivilized part of it, when drinks got involved, is much too shambolic to follow for now. Our Reichskommissar has gotten tired of inaction and defeatism and decided to personally join the war effort. His personal helicopter is geared and ready to depart at any moment, and the troops find courage in knowing that their leader is ready to share the danger with them, shoulder to shoulder. Not only that, but he has actually started worrying about the general state of the army. It was damn time. I dare say, and has planned a meeting with his most trusted advisors to find a comprehensible strategy. Let's hope he doesn't suggest dressing up as wild animals like the last time. Sorry, what? Right, the German Civil War's over, so they might start supporting us. German intervention in Africa. Okay, that's good. Siegfried Muller's had enough of being cramped between his spick and span bureaucrats in their spotless suits. He wanted to breathe the fresh and electricizing air of action and excitement. He wanted to repurpose his vigour on the battlefield, not the minor squabbles of words and logistics. For the last time before setting off to his new task, with the excitement of a child, he made sure his orders were understood. Going off to war had been easier when he was a nobody. Now he had to fill many papers and soothe his bureaucratic nerves. He told them that in case of his death on the battlefield, Rolf Steiner is the man in charge until the squabbling forces of Germania decide on a new Reichskommissar to take his place. Whenever that may be, he took Steiner in a brotherly embrace and wished him all the luck. Steiner tried to talk Miller out of his determination, but he just assured he didn't intend to die. Miller, dressed in a common camouflage uniform instead of a general's, took hold of the retainer in the helicopter. His crew told him, under the spinning of the rotor, how proud they were to fight with their superior as the helicopter set off. He knew that none of his colleagues down here would do the same, and he couldn't possibly imagine sitting his ass flat on a stool while the fighting rages on without him. He sighed as he was flooded with memories from the Second World War. By the time they disembarked days later, all those memories faded in a clear realisation. That's what Muller was born for. He readjusted his equipment and went off to the near clamour of war. He ran with his companions towards the smell of blood, jumping over the rocks and crashing through the dust as reinforcements all around them did the same, though more hesitant. Then he climbed the small mound to oversee the battlefield. A scenery of explosion, cries, shouts, dust, dying soldiers and blood unfolded. He rushed down the mound with a cry of relish and stumbled into the fight with his zeal. His first kill was a limping South African soldier, so he becomes a field marshal. Excellent! Central Africa, more than any other Reichskommissar, has close ties with the corporate world, and most of our budget comes from investors and their enterprises across the colony. While this ensures we have lots of money to divert towards the war effort, it also means that we need to constantly appease the corporations and shareholders that their money isn't going to disappear, otherwise our funds might dry quicker than expected, and we won't be able to sustain the demands of war for much longer. Yeah, we've done by far the most right now. We could lay siege to Cape Town quite easily, I think. However, I want to get through some more focuses before we do that. Thing is, I don't also want to give the South Africans the opportunity to recover from their losses. Oh my days, I didn't notice our power was gone. Miller let out one of his characteristic laughs, but inside he wanted to scream. Germania going to hell was one thing. The less supervision he had, the more money he could make. This war, though, was too close to home to ignore, and his bottom line, like his people, was already bleeding red. The last thing he needed tonight was a bad party. Flamboyant as always, Muller burst through the doors dressed in his safari suit, complete with his leopard print ascot and his resplendently shining iron cross. Yet looking out towards the crowd, all he saw were grey suits and dour faces. A sigh escaped his lips. He had wanted to relax tonight, to get away from the stream of bad news coming from the front. Instead, he'd have to work. He smiled his way to the bar where he ordered himself a drink, all the while examining the crowd. What he saw was little different than a hunt on the verge of collapse. The pack of prey had seen him and eyed his every move now. He had to be careful, for the slightest misstep could spoil the game. He would only have one shot to take, one chance to rectify the problem before clients started to withdraw. There was no sense going for the Belgians. They had nowhere else to turn, and their fates were tied with us. They knew it, as did he. It was the foreigners who were the real prize. There had always been violence and resistance, what's a tad bit more. The Congolese system was built to contain it. Who else could say that? After all, this little fuss was nothing compared to the horrors back home, in Europe or Asia. Slowly but surely, the evening picked up steam until it was just like old times that it is. That is, of course, except for Mr. Smith. As Miller approached, the American refused to shake his hand. "Ah, my friend, I think you're in need of a gift," Miller spat in his rehearsed English. With a snap of his finger, a native SS man walked in towards the pair carrying a domed dish. When he arrived, Miller encouraged Smith to lift it with a grin. Soon Smith was smiling too, for the papers inside were worth more than their weight in gold. Shipping labels bearing legitimate South African custom markings, just enough to move his entire shipment of diamonds across the sea to America out of Ponte Noire or Cape Town. Of course, drunk on joy and fine wine, Smith didn't stop to consider the small fleeks of blood on the labels, an ugly reminder of Muller. How Muller had come to acquire them just a few hours before. Oh no! Really? What are you doing? Right, I think we're going to have to try and smash through and cut some of this pocket that's moving up north. Right, fall back. We just need to get out of here. Number of expert divisions available 3. Number of trained 10. Untrained 6. Right, that's gonna help us out. A lot of OFN troops are down there, so hopefully we can... Oh, there's OFN troops all over the place now. Oh, there's some German troops finally appearing. Bob Bernard, one of the most prominent mercenary leaders in Central Africa, has been a precious resource to Reichskommissariat for more than 10 years, protecting valuable assets all across the colony and slowly becoming a staple of the security system. In a rare moment of tactical lunacy, the Reichskommissars decided to hold talks with him and ask him for a favour. He should talk to other mercenary leaders and convince them to work for the regular army auxiliary forces that would boast a number of our numbers by heavily amount and grant us hardened veterans for the fight ahead. East Africa has 10 divisions. Oh, that's awful, Hutig. Okay, we've got another couple of divisions cut off there. Yeah, we've almost killed 100,000 of them. After the General Bureau had already filled several dozen reports in the last few weeks, it became obvious that a hugely scaled war is nothing but stress in the Reichskommissariat's coffers. Numerous of the elder bureaucrats have been heard shouting how they damned this war for not being like the Cameroon conflicts. Well, damn them. They didn't have to bravely fight on the front lines back then, but there's some truth in there. Those conflicts didn't suck the profits once admired by even some of the European Reichskommissars dry as this war. Yeah, the war is sucking dry something else. At least it will begin soon. It will suck the manpower pool dry, as there are neither endless hordes of greedy mercenaries nor we have the money to employ them. Steiner quickly dragged Siegfried Müller out of the warrior's fantasy. Fortunately though, they had lots of men and roaming and live in the Congolese jungle. Those men consisted of some sorry conglomerates of rural African settlements, of once employed mercenaries, rogue former soldiers, African and foreign adventurers, and surely some fled plantation workers. Most likely fled from Hutig as well, but they had one thing in common. They admired the legendary warrior of the jungle, Bob Bernard, and are a precious resource we needed. We need manpower. Thus this man and his commando are the means to this treasure. Bernard, however, has refused Müller's order more often than any other man in Central Africa, sometimes making them look like desperate pleas. As such, we can either promise him an increased pay or award him more freedoms, for his commando after the war, for he is still in our service despite his arrogance. We must tread carefully. We need him to get to those men. This war may not be decided on the front lines, but by our careful proposition, and unfortunately, Bernard's affinity to it. Money always talks though, doesn't it? It does always talk. Reichskommissar Müller, mission accepted. Await first results in 40 hours. Sincere gratitude for new terms. Awaiting payments under new conditions in 24 hours. Colonel Bernard, 6th Commando. Bernard has concocted a very detailed and tactically sound plan. Should we lose ground, small independent groups of mercenaries will disappear behind enemy lines in a manner similar to the werewolves so dear to Moustache Man, masquerading as part of hundreds of Belgian, French and native security personnel left behind to tend to corporate assets. From there they'll enact guerrilla tactics against the Amerikaner, who can't even fathom the possibility that anyone not German would hold a rifle against them. Well, this is actually a very good plan. The mere fact that the Reichskommissar considering losing ground to the enemy should be very strong warning. This war won't end soon, and it will be much bloodier than we ever predicted. With Bernard convinced, we can set our sight on the dozens of minor mercenary groups scattered across the jungle, working for this or that corporate suit. Surely they won't miss the chance to fight for a better cause and better money. To be honest, we need the manpower. Oh my days. Come on. Yes, all of my divisions on that. It's actually ridiculous how many men we've killed. I just noticed we're in 0 manpower. Thing is, this might be quite stupid because I'm not really using them. I can bin these for manpower. Right, I think we're best trying to maybe push directly across here. Oh, go on, men. Oh my days, they're making a comeback here. Oh, we've got the encirclement, by the way. Things seem to have taken a very big swing there. Yeah, 371,000 we've killed. I think this war might be done, to be honest. Oh yeah, the Americans have been completely wiped out. Their volunteers, it's just Canadian, Australian and New Zealand. Reichskommissar Siegfried Müller had made a sudden, disheartening realisation. Despite all preparations and planning for this very night, he'd only been on his first drink of the night, unfortunately. However, the bounty laden within his plentiful schedule would be surely harvested later. Müller realised as his battalion had reached the rallying point drawn out on the war map, as the bombardment had torn apart the city finally ceased. Müller hopped onto a massive boulder and shouted to his battalion, "Gentlemen of Central Africa, the Reich has tasked us for a mission, and now we get to employ it as dutifully and properly as possible. Henceforth you shall carry out these duty orders. Go on into the city with whatever other Germans you find in the field. Shoot the Americans, and let's have ourselves a night on the town." Müller's mercenary company roared with compliance, rushing forth into the African night towards a burning city. After several hours aboard waiting, a lone soldier appeared before Muller, yelling, "Sir Reichskommissar!" "Sir!" Muller spit out his drink, startled by the soldier's sudden salute. "Apologies, sir. I was sent to inform you that the city is captured for the glory of the Reich, by the accomplishments of the men of yourself and Reichskommissar Schenck and Huttig." Muller looked upset at the soldier, saying, "Yeah, whatever. Go to some other plane," as he began walking off, prepare himself for his planned schedule. Inside the city, Muller's party raged as intensely as the fires that consumed the livelihoods of thousands. Taking refuge in one of the blown-apart taverns of the city, Muller and his men pranced about, chasing after the free bottles of booze and the highly exotic African narcotics. The men took a moment of calm amidst the storm, as all that filled the air were the embers of burning foundations, flesh and bone, and the smoke of cigars, if even just for a moment. Suddenly a laugh, then another soldier laugh, followed by another, until the entire bar was laughing. Then at the moment was when that tavern truly roared to life with laughter, booze and drugs. Breaking news has arrived today from Leopoldville. Siegfried Müller, the long-time Reichskommissar of Zentralafrika, has fled his colonial domain. This development comes mere hours after the murder of Müller's delegation at an East African state dinner in which all the attendees were slaughtered by Huttig and his SS. Müller's lack of attendance had spared his life, and Huttig's blind fury was a blessing to the Reichskommissar, who soon inevitably caught wind of the massacre in Bullerstad. The Reichskommissar, fearful that SS agents were likely en route to finish their task of high-profile slaughter, wasted no time returning to Leopoldville from his hunt. Without so much as a stop to gather belongings, Müller boarded an aircraft destined to Germany, suddenly eager to leave the African continent behind. As Müller soars back to Germany and Reichskommissar Schenck lays dead upon the floor of a dining hall in Bullerstad, Hans Huttig's conquest of the African Reichskommissariat appears to be inevitable. Those inside the borders of Central Africa and Angola look to a future with despair as the SS banner parades through their streets. Alright, so Müller just flees back to Germany. I thought he was maybe going to leave for Free France. So sadly guys, we're going to have to end that episode there. We're done. Huttig has taken over all of Africa. Well, the Afrika-Schild territories anyways. Müller's on his way back to Germany. And yeah, there's nothing else for us to do. I'm quite disappointed we didn't get through all the focus tree. I would have liked to have seen Steiner taking kind of more of an active role whilst Müller's away, but unfortunately we've not been able to. Maybe should have went a little bit, slower through the war. But yeah, we kind of blitzed our way through it, so I do apologise for that. But I hope you enjoyed nonetheless, because I did enjoy playing as Central Africa. So we've only got one more nation to play now, and that is of course East Africa with Huttig himself. Obviously it's probably going to be a lot more content for us because he's got a focus tree now for when he takes over all of the Afrika-Schild. So we'll be back with that on Wednesday. So until then guys, do take care. Cheer bye, then now.